Vivek, you lead our internal audit services relative to fintechs. And recently you had a number of clients gathered and we're talking about key themes and risk areas facing them in this challenging, changing regulatory landscape. Can you share a little bit about some of the outcomes of your discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. We were fortunate enough to have a number of our fintech clients out in the West Coast last week, and there were a couple of definitely trends that we saw that were top of mind for many of our internal audit groups, and I'll say there were probably four of them that come to mind, and they're not in any particular order. But the first one was just about the IPO market. As I'm sure you've sort of seen, the market's definitely headed in a headed in a good direction, and we're seeing the market being hotter and hotter. And in fact, we've recently had two very successful fintech IPOs. And so some of the conversations that we had with some of our fintech companies is what is a role that internal audit plays as organizations think through their strategy on a go forward basis. And there's some organizations that are thinking to go public in the next 6 to 8 months. And there's some who have a broadened spectrum where they want to go between 12, 18, and 24 months. So that was one topic that was definitely of mind. And internal audit absolutely plays a key role there, whether it be helping out with SOX readiness, understanding what some of the technology governance challenges may be, data governance, et cetera. But they're definitely play a role there, especially as generally in these organizations, internal audit is the hub of the risk and control or the risk and control SMEs of the group. So one of the other topics that we saw was the use of AI, which is probably not surprising in the grand scheme of things. But I think when you think about a fintech company, the use of AI is core to what they do. So the conversations weren't necessarily about how are we using AI to a large degree. It's built into a lot of the things that they do, but it was more related to how are others that are in their ecosystem use AI and how does that impact what they're doing today. So one of the conversations that we went into, a specific example that we went into is there was a specific organization that had contracted with a content/data provider. And as part of that agreement, the ask was to provide broad spectrum data across demographics, et cetera. And one of the things that the fintech realized over time was they were getting data. They were seeing anomalies in some of the results that they were doing their business process reviews. And what they found out ultimately was the data/content provider started using AI models, and they realized that the data was no longer broad spectrum. It ended up becoming narrowed unintentionally, and it wasn't known to them immediately. And so what they realized was they needed to have some more controls and to understand as they're getting data feeding into their models, how do you identify that and making sure they're running some tests and challenging that, which was an interesting topic, right? So it's less about how they're using it, but more about how they're getting the data as part of their value chain.
Yeah, sounds like a great reason to take a look at third-party risk management and what data you're getting from third parties, how it was identified, what they're doing with it, and how you're taking in the output.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then the two other topics that I'll mention is one's probably not surprising, again, the reg change, and the volume. And there was a lot of conversation on how do we stay apprised of all the changes that are coming. But then equally important is how do we understand how that impacts us? So whether that be we're going to have different regulatory requirements as we think through it, as we go through, in the future, or whether that be how that changes our product strategy and what does that mean and how can internal audit stay ahead of that? So there was definitely some conversations related to that. And then the last one was talent management. As we mentioned, right, the pace of change that we're seeing, whether it be related to the use of technology, whether it be economic conditions, or whether it be the product strategy organizations have, one of the challenges is how do we have resources that can not only understand all these changes that are occurring, not only understand the value chain, right, and how processes that they operate in, but then equally important is how are they able to dissect that and having that from a risk perspective. And that's been also top of mind for many of these organizations.
Yeah, Vivek, how are you seeing these companies manage that talent gap
Yeah,
or that
yeah,
talent challenge?
yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I think there's been multiple ways of how organizations are attacking that. One of them is, having the ability to cross-train individuals, having, and as part of that, having individuals, see an end-to-end flow of how things are operating. So where someone may have only looked at technology in the past, having them take a look at compliance and business as well, to having them understand that. So that's one way, of course. Another way is, reaching out, joining, industry forums, industry conversations, reaching out to individuals like ourselves to say what else are we seeing out in the market that help them stay abreast of everything, staying abreast of all the key risks that are out there. And then, of course, lastly, is trying to see if there's a way to acquire some talent that may have that specific skill set that they may not have in house.
Well, Vivek, thank you today for doing your part to fill that talent gap and that critical learning that our clients need here in this area. So appreciate you sharing your view on these hot topics in fintech. Thanks so much.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.